If you're left-handed and on the St. Louis Cardinals Monday, you had a pretty good time as the Cardinals beat the Cubs in their first meeting of 2025. Is it a sign of more things to come in this rivalry over the next couple of weeks? We'll talk about it coming up on B-Schaeff Daily. What's going on, everyone, and welcome in to this edition of B-Schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer with you. It is Monday, June 23rd, 2025, as the Cardinals blast the Cubs at Busch Stadium 8-2, the final score, as the Redbirds jump out and draw first blood in this NL Central rivalry. The first time we've seen the Cardinals and Cubs match up in 2025, but it'll be far from the last, as we're going to see another dozen games between these two teams, a good chunk of which are taking place over the next couple of weeks. The Cardinals hosting the Cubs until Thursday, and then the return trip goes over the 4th of July weekend at Wrigley Field. So a lot of fun between the Cardinals and Cubs coming up over the next couple of weeks, and the Cardinals get out in front in the season series with an 8-2 victory. Lefties had their day. You start with Matthew Liberatore, the left-handed starting pitcher on the mound for St. Louis. He goes 7 innings of 2-run baseball, which is exactly what the doctor ordered for a beleaguered Cardinals bullpen. We'll talk about the roster move that took place before the game on Monday and the one that's coming Tuesday, as Rivalry Munoz pitched an inning for the Cardinals on Monday. I think that's the only inning he's going to throw during his stint with St. Louis, because there is a starter on tap for Tuesday who is going to require a roster move to get back on the team. That's Michael McGreevy. So we'll talk about the machinations as the Cardinals have churned through the Memphis shuttle this week, and it's not over just yet. We'll also talk about the lefties that homered over and over and over against Chicago starter Ben Brown tonight. The Cardinals had exactly the recipe in their starting 9 that they needed to combat a right-hander who throws hard but who has had some trouble against left-handed hitters this season, and that was definitely the case tonight. 4 2-run homers for the Cardinals as they jump all over Ben Brown and the Chicago Cubs. So all that's coming up on the show tonight. If you enjoy daily Cardinals coverage throughout the season and the offseason, make sure to hit subscribe on this channel, because that's what we bring you here with the B-Schaeff Daily podcast. You can also find B-Schaeff Daily by searching on Spotify and following the show over there. Let's get into it, though. I mean, hard not to be impressed by the way the Cardinals came out and punched first in this very critical series, because you haven't seen the Cubs yet. It's a quirk of the schedule, the balanced schedule that we now know is in place in Major League Baseball. And I'm not a fan of the balanced schedule. I think a lot of baseball fans, Cardinals fans especially, that think about the rivalries in the NL Central are maybe not a huge fan of the balanced schedule. I understand the argument that you'd like to see every team every year. Sure, that's nice, I suppose. I just honestly don't really care about the number of interleague games that you end up seeing under this format. It's fine. Every other year would be enough for me to see the Cardinals play all of the American League teams. I do kind of prefer playing the divisional rivals more. Well, they lopped off some divisional rival games a couple of years ago, and instead of playing like 18, 19 times, you play 12 or 13 times. And the Cardinals get the Cubs this year 13 times. It doesn't come in the early portion of the season this year, and I'm actually okay with that. If you're only going to play them 13 times, I'd play them in June, I'd play them in July, I'd play them in August, I'd play them in September. It's basically what you're getting. Instead of, early April in Wrigley Field, no thanks. I don't need to go to Chicago until May, and June's even better. July, it gets a little sticky. But August, September, there's some merit to it. So I'm okay with these games all being in front of you. Gives you something to look forward to. And now I think it comes at the perfect time for the Cardinals, where they are trailing the Cubs in the NL Central. You can't forget about the Reds. You can't forget about the Brewers. I understand that. But it just kind of feels like if the Cardinals are going to be in this thing, it's going to be going down to the wire against the Cubs. I don't think the Cubs are fading out of contention. I think it's going to be them at the end with somebody else, probably the Cardinals or Brewers. I'm just not a big believer in the Cincinnati Reds at this point after we saw the Cardinals take 2 of 3 from that team over the weekend at Busch. But I think this is the perfect time because you're playing the Cubs, including tonight, 7 times over the next 2 weeks, basically. This 4-gamer and then the 3-gamer over 4th of July weekend at Wrigley. and you're trailing 4.5 games coming into Monday. Well, the Cardinals get the win. It's now 3.5. Very quickly, you can see the benefit of these head-to-heads and taking the bull by the horns and taking advantage of these situations. Because if the Cardinals split with the Cubs over this 4-gamer, well, you're still 4.5 back at the end of Thursday. You take 3 of 4, suddenly the significance of a 4-game series is going to materialize. The Cardinals would be just 2.5 games back if they could pull that off. A sweep of the series, which would be, I don't even necessarily want to think about that because I think my YouTube comments would be exploding with euphoria, and I don't want to get your guys' hopes up. But if it happened, the Cardinals would be a half game out after the conclusion of Thursday's festivities. It's the benefit of knowing that the Cubs can't win while you're beating them. It was funny to hear from Lars Nootbaar tonight in the Cardinals clubhouse mentioning that, look, yeah, you want to play well any time of the year, and you want to play well no matter who you're facing. But these games where you're facing the Cubs, you don't have to check the scoreboard to know whether they won or lost. You're going to be doing your work against their team. And he said a lot of times lately it seems like we win a game and then you see, oh, yeah, the Cubs won as well, so you didn't gain any ground on them. This is their opportunity, and the Cardinals struck first with a really well-rounded game tonight. It was interesting to see around 6:45 with first pitch that the shadows very much came into effect. I think it affected batters on both sides in those early innings, and it was very unique that everybody seemed to be swinging on the first pitch. I think the first inning was like 5 minutes. It was crazy how quickly things were progressing, and ultimately the game kind of kept that pace. 2 hours and 10 minutes was the length of the game, 27,058 paid to see it, and I can't blame y'all for it not being any more than that because I was in the air-conditioned press box, and the 94, 95-degree heat out there in the crowd at Busch Stadium, I was not jealous of the folks that were out there. It's hot, man. It's sticky, and that's kind of going to be the theme, I think, this week, and probably moving into the St. Louis summer. You guys know the drill by now. But for the Cardinals to really sort of get to Ben Brown, the opposing starter tonight, they had to kind of see him first, and that's the way that it went down. First time through the order, you're kind of dealing with the shadows, and the game was going so quickly, so basically everybody in the lineup, for the most part, had that experience where the shadows weren't really gone, and you've already kind of taken your at-bats. The first hit of the game for the Cardinals was that off the bat of Nolan Arenado, who dropped one in as a bloop in the second inning down the right field line. He thought he was going to get 2 out of it, just dropping it right there down the first base line, and then blew a tire about 20 feet past first base and then retreated to first base. It was very Adolis Garcia, if you remember his trip up at third base a number of years ago as a pinch runner in that situation in September of, I want to say, 2018, if I'm not mistaken on the timeline there. It kind of reminded you of that a little bit, but that was the first hit for the Cardinals, but they didn't really get a lot going until you get into the fourth inning. Victor Scott II had a base hit and a stolen base in the third, his 22nd of the season. I'll be curious to see if he can get to 50 this season for the Cardinals. He probably can if he gets enough playing time in the second half. But the fourth inning, the Cardinals really started to get things going in the scoring department. Wilson Contreras, you know he loves playing the Cubs. He doubles, and Lars Nootbaar with a home run to drive him in. The first of 4 left-handed hitters to launch a 2-run homer against the starter, Ben Brown. I believe the stat from Cardinals PR was Ben Brown became the first Cubs pitcher in the Cardinals-Cubs rivalry since 1912 to allow 4 2-run home runs to the Cardinals in the same game. So that hadn't happened in over 100 years, and it just seemed like the Cardinals needed to have somebody on base if they were going to get the homer. There was one that I believe Pete Crow Armstrong took away from Brendan Donovan later in the game, and it was debatable whether or not it was truly a home run robbery right there at the center field wall. I think it might have snuck over the wall had PCA not intervened, but I think he had to do so because there was nobody on base, and the Cardinals weren't settling for anything less than multi-run homers in this game. 2-run homers. Lars Nootbaar had one. Donovan has one on a absolute smoke job to right field. A line drive that I didn't even think the height off the ground was enough to get it out of the stadium. Apparently it was by a couple rows worth. It feels like the ball was still rising when it got to the crowd. Hopefully nobody got clocked by that thing. But that was a heck of a swing. Alec Burleson, I damn near had the call of it up in the press box when we just try to take one pitch per game that you call yard on. And I was looking at the way in the fifth inning that Ben Brown was laboring. It seemed like the Cardinals were ready to pounce on him once again. And then when he throws over to first base before throwing a pitch to Burleson, I wanted to ask Burleson about that, and I didn't think I'd necessarily get a great answer, but the opportunity did not arise in the postgame clubhouse because there were just so many players that were cycling through and filtering through for the media to kind of go and have a scrum around. But the one question I would have asked Burleson that I did not in the moment was, do you know when a guy starts throwing over to check on the runner at first base before throwing you the first pitch at the at-bat that you've got him on the ropes? Because that is really the way that it seemed. And first pitch swinging, Alec Burleson hits another homer. He has been locked in lately and hits his ninth of the season there in the fifth inning against Ben Brown. Really good to see the swing from him. Obviously, good to see it from Lars Nootbaar, who is coming back around again. I know everybody kind of had their thoughts on Lars Nootbaar when he was struggling, and Wilson Contreras, I think, put it best tonight where he said, I'm not worried about Lars Nootbaar. It's, he's going to have his struggles. Everybody is going to go through something like that at various points in the season. That was kind of echoed by Alec Burleson, but they have a lot of faith and confidence in Lars Nootbaar as a teammate, and certainly was part of the engine to get things going tonight. But it was his homer in the fourth, and then you saw it from Donovan in the fifth inning, followed by that shot by Alec Burleson, his ninth of the year, continuing to make noise in the middle of the lineup with now an 818, the OPS with a 307 batting mark on the campaign for Burley. And then later in the game, the sixth inning, they still have Ben Brown in there, and Nolan Gorman got his opportunity to launch a two-run homer, which was really, I think, a critical swing for Gorman, who you look up, and he had really been struggling the last couple of series on the wrapping up the road trip in Chicago with the White Sox, and then the series over the weekend against the Reds. Gorman was a 1 for 16 with a 10 strikeout total over that span. He did log 4 walks in that stretch, but just the last two series before this one, suddenly the downturn had come for him. And so hopefully that's a swing that was able to maybe jumpstart him and get him going again. Didn't necessarily need it if you're the Cardinals at that point in the game, but it made it 8-1. Matthew Liberatore gave up another run in the seventh inning, but got through that seventh inning on 85 pitches. And certainly if you're the Cardinals, you're feeling really good about what he gave you tonight. Against the tough Cubs lineup, he found a way to neutralize some of the biggest threats in that lineup, including one of the biggest moments maybe of the Cardinals season to this point was in the fifth inning where he'd already given up one run and things were starting to mount a little bit against Libby, and he loads the bases with a walk to the number 9 batter, Matt Shaw. Ian Happ is up to the plate, and if you know anything about Ian Happ's history against the Cardinals, you're expecting damage in that spot. I certainly was. I was ready to use my yard call on Ian Happ predicting a home run if Libby had thrown a first pitch ball to him. But as it turns out, Matthew Liberatore had a plan for the way that he wanted to attack Ian Happ in this situation. It was funny, too. Libby was asked, did you know about Ian Happ, kind of his history against the Cardinals? He's like, no, I had no idea. So not something he was aware of, probably for the best. A lack of knowledge there is just, you don't need something like that in your head going into a matchup like that. Now he'll know, I guess, if he remembers that somebody told him about it. But nevertheless, Dusty Blake coming out. And this was fascinating to hear from Libby tonight in the post-game clubhouse. He says, I didn't know for sure that I was getting a pitching mound visit from Dusty, but thought well-timed I could use a little bit of a breather before this key spot in the game. Cardinals were still up 2-1, but the bases were loaded, 2 outs. Ian Happ at the dish. You just feel like things are about to go off the rails, given his history against the Cardinals. He said, I knew before Dusty came out what pitch I wanted to throw him. I wanted to throw him a cutter and get him kind of in on the hands because we had been pounding him away. He had seen a lot of other stuff from me so far in the game, and that was an opportunity to maybe say, he's thinking one thing, we can try to jam him, and it's a good ground ball pitch. You might even get the double play ball. Dusty was going out there with the game plan saying, well, you could throw him this, you could throw him that. And he said, no, I really want to throw the cutter. And did it and executed it. First pitch double play, well turned by Arenado at third. It was a 5-4-3. You get the nice throw from Donovan to first, Contreras with the stretch. That was one of the key moments of the Cardinals season to this point, because winning this game sets the tone for this series. We'll see if the Cardinals are able to take, obviously, further advantage of it. But just how massive for Matthew Liberatore to know his stuff, know his repertoire, and know, I mean, it just tells you the way that he's thinking out there and the way that he has prepared. I think that's such a big difference, and he's continued to allude to it in the way that he's going about things this year as a starter compared to maybe past iterations of him in the rotation or as a spot starter. His routine and his preparation has been so key. He knew exactly what he wanted to do against Ian Happ in that spot. He had thought through it before the moment even came and was able to execute the pitch. First pitch, you get a Cubs lineup where Liberatore had mentioned that it's not a lineup that'll chase a bunch, but it's a lineup that's going to swing if you're in the zone. And so I think he knew, look, I can get him to roll over on this pitch if I put this cutter in on his hands a little bit after he's been looking away. That was fascinating to hear from Libby, and I think that was one of the key spots, clearly the key spot of this baseball game, as the Cardinals able to maintain the 2-1 lead, and then more offense coming thereafter in the bottom of the fifth inning, and obviously the home run from Gorman in the sixth as well. So that fifth inning was what really told the tale for the Cardinals tonight, because you get the 2 runs in the bottom of the fourth. You feel like you're about to give it back in the top of the fifth. Libby holds serve, gets that double play off of Ian Happ's bat, and then 6 more runs scored on the homers over the subsequent 2 innings for the Cardinals, and that was all she wrote. 8-2, the Cardinals get the win. Really, really impressive stuff, I thought, from Matthew Liberatore, who said after the game he could have gone another inning, but I think this was probably the ideal set of circumstances. Get him out after 7. He's already approaching, in terms of his innings load, a territory where I think the Cardinals are going to have to maybe monitor and be a little bit careful. They have said, and Ollie Marmol has said over and over, that this is not a case where they look at just strictly the innings on a guy and say, hey, there's a number that we can't surpass. It's more about how their staff looks at the stressful situations and a little bit deeper than just what's the innings total. But it should be noted that this is a career high already in Major League Baseball for Matthew Liberatore. He threw 86 innings last year. After 7 innings tonight, he's at 86 1/3. Now, that's not a career high for him in just his lifetime innings thrown, because if you count minor league baseball, the year that he was basically a full-time starter when he was in Memphis, going back to 2023, started 13 games there, and then 11 more in St. Louis to go along with 11 relief appearances in St. Louis. He totaled 126 1/3 that season. So he's not to that point yet, but already more innings than he threw in any big league season in his career, surpassing last year's total of 86. And we're on June the 23rd. So all of that being considered, the temperature, the air temperature being considered, I feel like it was definitely the right move to get Libby out of there after 7. You don't have anything more to prove. You're up by 6 runs, 85 pitches. That's more than enough. You get Riley O'Brien in there, and you also get an inning out of Roddery Munoz, who was going to pitch tonight because I think he's going to be out tomorrow. With Michael McGreevy coming up, Munoz is going to be the likely candidate to go back to AAA. And you might say, well, I didn't even know Roddery Munoz was on the team right now. Well, that happened earlier today. As we kind of alluded in the previous episode of B-Schaeff Daily, Graceffo throwing 2 innings on Sunday kind of felt like he was maybe destined to be sent out for a fresh arm. We speculated, could it be Ryan Fernandez? Well, no, he pitched on Sunday, 13 pitches in an inning of work. So I was not top of mind with Roddery Munoz's name, but he was the guy that he was in for a mop-up scenario tonight if it was needed. But once again, 2 days in a row in the hot St. Louis weather, that Cardinals starters have gotten it done. Miles Michaelis got them 5 innings that were needed on Sunday, and then Monday, Liberatore gives you 7. 6 hits allowed, 2 runs, 1 walk, 5 strikeouts. Had some good stuff, and he lowers his ERA back below 4.0 as he's sitting now at 3.96. So he was very effective. Munoz able to eat up an inning. He'll probably be back to Memphis tomorrow, and then you'll see potentially what it looks like further churn between now and the 3rd of July as the Cardinals still go through this stretch without any off days that are scheduled. Obviously, they've had some, but then have had to play a doubleheader to make up for that. Doubleheader or two, really, over the past couple of weeks. So we'll see. There could be more moves coming, but good to see Liberatore basically maybe take things down a notch or two when it pertains to the Cardinals bullpen and the fact that those guys have been pretty overworked. I asked Ollie Marmol about the value of Liberatore giving you 7 tonight with the state of things in that bullpen, and he said, yeah, there were a number of guys down tonight that, like, normally you might not say they're down, but given the recent circumstances, they really, really wanted to try to stay away from a number of those guys, and Libby going 7 really allows everything else to kind of fall into place. And so now I think for the rest of this Cubs series, you basically got all hands on deck. You're not going to be gratuitous in the way that you use your bullpen, but certainly I think the Cardinals are going to be comfortable situationally going into Tuesday, basically with whatever they need from that group, which is a big plus for sure. Let me know in the comments what you thought about this win tonight for the Cardinals and the fact that they're starting things off on the right foot against the Cubs, who are now at 46-32. The Cardinals 43-36, just 3.5 games separating the Cardinals and Cubs at the top of the National League Central Division. Be interesting to see the way the rest of this series unfolds. Would maybe like to see an opportunity for Mason Wynn to unload one on a Justin Turner ground out to end the game tonight. Turner was the batter and grounded it to Mason Wynn, and instead of showing off the arm a little bit, which I think would be kind of fun, he just simply tossed it to second base to get the force out there because there was a runner on first. If you'll recall, a number of years ago, Justin Turner kind of had some comments about being told Mason Wynn, set the record in the Futures game, 101 mile per hour throw from shortstop or whatever the circumstance was there. And Turner kind of poo-pooed it and said, that's too flashy. We just need to be playing good baseball and, you don't need to be showing off like that. So I would love for there to be a moment where Mason Wynn could do that in this series. But I think maybe knowing that you play the Cubs 12 more times after tonight, that was the heady baseball play to just go ahead and cap it by flipping the ball to second base and the Cardinals getting the big win. And there's a chance they could climb even closer to the Cubs this week, but we'll see the way that it plays out on Tuesday, as it'll be Michael McGreevy that the Cardinals plan to send to the mound against Jamison Tyone, who is 7-4 with a 3.84 ERA. The Cardinals do not avoid Matthew Boyd in this series. Things are going to really turn up over Wednesday and Thursday when the Cardinals will face, I believe, consecutive lefties, because I saw it reported tonight that Shota Imanaga expected to return from the injured list to the Cubs and make his appearance in this series on Thursday. He's 3-2 with a 2.82 ERA. Matthew Boyd 6-3 with a 2.84. The Cardinals have not announced starters yet, according to MLB.com, for Wednesday or Thursday. Would imagine you'll see Fetty later in this series, and we'll see the way that the Cardinals want to line things up thereafter. After Sonny Gray pitched on Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, theoretically you could throw him on Thursday, but I don't know that they want to necessarily push Sonny Gray into a day game on regular rest. When you do bring McGreevy into the fold for Tuesday, you could probably spare Sonny Gray that extra day of rest, which I think the Cardinals have been pretty cognizant of, pretty aware that this is something that carries quite a bit of value. Had a great conversation, I thought, this morning on the Randy Carricker show featuring Brooke Grimsley, with neither of those two people present, because it was myself and Matt Rocchio on STL Sports Central, kind of talking through some of the machinations on decisions that are made, and the way that the Cardinals have handled their pitching staff has allowed them to sort of lock into a place right now where they have all their pitchers healthy in their rotation, and their bullpen health has been very strong too. So for as much as it does feel like certain guys are getting worked quite a bit right now, like Kyle Leahy is already thrown like 43 innings of relief and is on a pace to throw like 100 innings. That's just not something that's going to be sustainable for him to have success in the bullpen role that he's been used. So certainly the Cardinals kind of mindful of a lot of these aspects. I'll be curious, though, from a starting perspective, if they would look to really push to get Sonny Gray on regular rest, if he would be game for that, or if they would say, no, he's one of the guys that we want to get him an extra day as well. And so rather than plop him in front of Palante, who looked good, obviously, on Friday night against the Reds, we'll see what that looks like. Very well could be Fetty Palante, could also be Fetty Gray if they wanted to get cheeky with it, but we'll see as that gets announced throughout the week. But appreciate you guys, as always, for listening. That's going to do it for this edition of the show. We will talk to you next time, tomorrow night, after another Cardinals-Cubs matchup, right here on B-Schaeff Daily. Peace.